music? China? What are they even saying? What is this Chinese rap music? Sounds like they're just saying ching chang chong.
My chance new girl watch made in China. We play ping pong ball made in China.
Hello and welcome to China Econ Talk. I'm your host, Jordan Schneider, here today with Ben Hu, the CTO and co-founder of Lolishuo, an English language learning app targeted at adults and powered by AI. So Ben, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me, Jordan.
So Ben, why are Chinese people not very good at speaking English?
That's a very good question. I think, first of all, fundamentally, the Chinese language itself is so different from English, right? I mean, in general, if you say like normal people from probably Latin language countries like European or Latin America, they probably speak much better English compared to like a normal Chinese person. I think
Sure.
the language itself is so different. And also the reason that the public school system, like the education system itself, emphasize more on the reading and writing part, not really on the communication part. So when we talk about like communication in fluent English, the Chinese people in general are not doing very well.
What are the incentives that make the education system focus more on reading and writing than listening and speaking?
I think there are a lot of aspects or reasons behind it, but I think one thing in particular is that probably in terms of evaluation, in terms of taking exams and scoring the exams, reading and writing are much easier to be evaluated compared to listening and speaking. It's the same for like the TOEFL test from ETS, right? For quite a while, it only emphasized on the reading and writing, like vocabulary or words, right? But same thing, it's just easier to evaluate to like giving the score compared to listening and speaking. That's definitely one major reason. Other than that, actually, I'm not sure. Maybe it's a historical reason. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I found it very shocking when I come to China, and when I first came to China and I saw people reading academic level graduate papers in their respective fields and having no problem going through, the latest research in physics or biology or what have you. But when it came to, very casual English language conversation, it was a real challenge for even some of the most educated college students in China. So, it's a real need you guys are filling. Can you talk a little bit about the initial idea for the app and how it evolved to where it is today?
Yeah, I think your observation is exactly why we started at the very beginning. Like when back in the 2012, we realized that a lot of the folks around us are really willing to pay for the English learning, particularly in the communication skills. And the truth is, or the fact is that they paid a lot, probably ranging from $1,500 to $3,000 per year to a lot of the offline tutoring schools for the English. But unfortunately, the result was not very satisfying. So at that time, we see that when there was a gap between the consumer need and the result, there's something we can do about it. That's pretty much how we started to think about making a mobile app which can give user instant feedback.
Sure.
That's pretty much why we started.
I remember discovering this app a year ago and was blown away by the fact that it can correct you on pronunciation, which is something, me as a Chinese learner of the past 2 years have had a really hard time just convincing teachers to tell me when my pronunciation is wrong. Because I think it's like the most tedious part of teaching is every sentence, every time, every tone needs to be corrected. And this thing that your app does is it gives you a number score based on how good you were and will tell you like which vowels are wrong and how you can correct them. So I'm curious, maybe where this idea came from, like and a little peek into the pain of developing the technology to be able to give you that sort of very focused, very personalized feedback.
At that time, we definitely got some inspiration from a very popular music app back then called Changba. So yeah, I mean, it's the truth. So then we realized that we should probably provide something similar or provide the equivalent version of that for English learner. And apparently it's a very...
So Changba, basically it was like you're singing karaoke and it will tell you when you're out of tune.
It's a bit different in terms of, there's a definitely similarity between technology, but it's still very different. But the thing that why the app, when we released in 2013 was that popular is that first of all, we purposely make sure the evaluation engine can work offline without data. Because back then, the 4G or 3G, whatever data plan was still very expensive. Second, I think the fact that the person can talk to the phone without interacting with other kind of fits into the, like, Chinese people usually are very shy. Even if they go to an English corner, talk to each other, they may be too shy to actually open up. So I think all these attributes contribute hyper growth after our initial release back in February 2013. So that's pretty much.
One of the things being important to growth is being able to do it, like, in a room that doesn't necessarily have good service, where you're alone and no one can hear you speaking your English.
Yeah, that's definitely the angle.
So were there other particular moments or decisions that helped you guys along on the growth curve?
I mean, there are a lot. I mean, even back in 2013, that one thing we did, that we briefly made the app not free. So we briefly made the app to be a paid app on iOS. That actually make us very popular on the iOS rankings. And after maybe being a non-free app for several weeks, I mean, I forgot the exact number of days, then we made it free again, which actually drives the consumer's desire to download it.
Oh, because it's like, oh man, look at me, we're getting a deal. They mispriced it for a few minutes.
Totally. So we actually didn't do that on purpose. It's just, we just want to experiment. So the action we took to make it a non-free is just an experiment. So we didn't actually see that coming, but actually it's had a very good effect. And of course, back in several years ago, in 2017 or 2018, when we launched our systematic content, the AI English teacher powered Dong English, we also did a very successful performance marketing on WeChat ecosystem as well. So there are several moments. Yeah.
Sure. So you must have a lot of interesting data on how Chinese learn English. Different regional variations, sex variations, age variations. I'm curious what interesting things you've learned about who really makes progress, who doesn't, and why.
There's several demographics data I can share with you that right now, because the penetration of our product, we basically have a very similar population distribution, the general population distribution. Like, for example, we have definitely more users on the coasts, but we also have a lot of users in the western part of the country as well.
Sure.
And for our paid customers, it's definitely more females than male. Which also kind of fit into the stereotype, is like, especially in China, when we grew up, we all feel like our female students actually learn language much better or much faster than male students. And other than that, our demographics highly concentrated on between young adults, mainly between 18 and 230. But because the product itself, we actually have learners as young as like 10 or 11, as older as maybe 60s.
Wow.
So it's a very wide range of customers.
And the motivations for people wanting to learn English, is it what are the primary ones?
That's actually a very interesting observation. Like probably 15 or 20 years ago in China, I think the primary reason people or a person want to learn English is definitely job related. They want to find a better job or things like that. But after 15 or 20 years of the development, right now, if you look at the reason behind our users' learning purpose, on the top is actually like things like, I want to go abroad without using a translation tool or translation app. I want to watch American or like UK TV or movies without subtitles. Or I want to communicate to foreigners in a fluent way. And of course, job placement or find a better job is still on the top of the list, but definitely not the number one or number two, which kind of surprised us at the very beginning. But it also may show that at this moment, I think being able to speak a better English or very good English sort of a requirement for a lot of jobs already.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like it's not a plus anymore. Like, it's not, you will not be just rewarded by speaking fluent English.
Yeah,
for certain jobs.
As a foreigner in China, I will also say this is now working the other way. And you don't just get jobs by speaking Chinese in a way that you could, say 10 years ago. So a detour into cloud computing. You chose AWS as your cloud solution. I'm curious if you considered any domestic competitors at the time, and if you did, what you thought they were lacking, and maybe how you see the development of the domestic industry versus the foreign players.
It's a very good question. So I think back then when we when we chose a cloud computing provider, at that time, there was no other cloud computing provider in China at that time, I think, as good as AWS. Mm-hmm. So we first of all, I came back from the States, so I knew AWS pretty well. At that time, AWS was probably the only choice we wanted to pick at that time. But honestly, after that's like almost 7 years, right now the domestic players are doing very well for the past 7 years. Of course, particularly like Ali Cloud, Ali Yun, right, is doing very well.
Sure.
So I think for us, the competition is always good. So
sure.
It's make sure we have more choices.
Sure. As a company that's considering and working on internationalization, does having a foreign cloud make that easier, or have you interacted with Ali Yun enough to understand if they could support that type of foreign user base?
I think Ali Cloud has a lot of presence overseas as well, and same as the Tencent Cloud from Tencent, right? And even in the international markets, AWS is not alone, right? I think the Microsoft Azure and the Google Cloud are also working very hard to catch up. Actually, there's one player probably missing out. A lot of people miss is that Huawei is actually working very hard in the public cloud sector. Sure. So it's good. I mean, for us, as I said, competition is always good. It's make sure we have more choices. Make sure every single provider is working very hard to improve their service and to make us happy. So,
sure.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about Chinese content and consumer-focused companies doing internationalization, which is a relatively new trend over just the past 2 or 3 years we really saw come into bloom. So I just spent 2 years at a master's program in China and China studies, and doing it, I watched a lot of iQIYI, but didn't necessarily gain too many hard skills. Had I only known that at the University of San Francisco's new master's in applied economics, I could have learned something to actually make me super employable. R, SQL, machine learning, all that good stuff you actually see on job listings in Silicon Valley and Zhongguancun, not necessarily have you watched all of Wanlasong. So in this program, you can study the economics of platforms, auctions, and business strategy at the same time as you learn the tools of econometrics, experimental design, and machine learning. Plus, for all those non-US students out there, this program is designated STEM, so you can apply for a 3-year extension on your student visa and keep working in the US after you graduate. To learn more and get an application fee waiver, go to usfca.edu/Jordan. You want to talk a little bit about ByteDance and what they've been able to accomplish?
ByteDance is a company. Actually, I think it's what they have been achieved with TikTok and other apps is very inspirational for a lot of the Chinese companies. And actually, there's very, very few Chinese companies ever achieved mainstream acknowledgement or whatever you can call it in the international markets. Actually, a lot of the gaming companies have been very popular or very active in international markets already, probably 5-6 years ago. Yeah. But I don't think they ever achieved this kind of mainstream acknowledgement from a lot of the Western media, stuff like that, like ByteDance did with TikTok.
I feel like what the games have been doing is sort of different, right?
Yeah,
Tencent, it's much easier to buy half of Supercell than it is to create games that have billions of users.
Yeah,
right?
there are actually a lot of gaming companies very popular as well. And also, actually, there are a lot of the e-commerce company from China doing pretty well on Amazon. They probably just less known in terms of the
that's a good point.
The mainstream media, but no matter what, I think what ByteDance did with TikTok is very inspirational for others.
Yeah, because I guess there's been this myth, narrative, what have you, that this was just not something that China could do, and they could, make products that people would buy all around the world, but not necessarily, apps and things that people would interact with on a daily basis. So I'm curious where you guys are thinking about in terms of markets and the potential challenges that you're going to need to figure out in order to help the rest of the world, not just Chinese, improve their spoken English.
That's a very good question. First of all, I think language learning in general is a very generic need across the board. And there's a very few things I think is as generic as that. And we internally always have a theory that right now across the whole world, if your country's income level is still like in the middle range, like China, probably 5,000 to 8,000 or 5,000 to 10,000 US dollar per cap. And if your native language is not English, your country probably have a very strong need to improve that because English is still the language in terms of international training and academic-wise, stuff like that. So if a person in a country want to get a better job, they want to get into advanced degrees, they want to do research, they sort of need to have very good English or English understanding.
Sure.
So from that perspective, I think we probably have a very good size of the market we can tackle. And also, there are already a lot of players in this market as well, which is another sign that language is a very strong need, especially in a lot of the countries we've been looking at. On the top list of their education category, majority of the apps actually language learning related.
Interesting.
On the top 1, top 2 in the list. So it's a very generic.
When when adults in China, they're trying to be good students and improve themselves, adult education is not just an English focused market in China. You have communities like Ximalaya and Dedao where you can learn lots of different things. So I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about the other players and what other interesting things are happening in adult education and why, of all the things that people could learn on their commutes going to work, of all the things you could learn on your commute, you end up choosing Liu Shuo over these other apps out there.
So for adults education sector or for adults learning something, this is more like a lifelong learning thing compared like students, like K-12 students or even college students. So they probably want to improve certain skills for jobs, for life. Like if you want to broaden the sense of learning or broaden the sense of like education, you can say if I want to learn to cook, it's also some sort of education.
Yeah, sure.
Made to help myself to survive or stuff like that. So from that perspective, I think there are definitely very different needs, and you can learn all kinds of things. But I think why we choose English as the angle to work on, or why a user wants to improve their English, is that it's like a basic skill, and especially for the past 40 years, the China's open reform sort of makes English learning like a must thing for a lot of people in China. Like if you ask them what they want to improve or what they want to learn, I think English probably is going to be the one that pop up in their mind other than other skills, because English is a basic skill. It actually can probably help you to learn other things like programming, like economics or stuff like that, like, right? If you learn, let's say, like accounting, I don't know, CPA and CFA, probably English helps as well. But like language is a very basic skill. So that's why I think a lot of the people would love to pay for the service or to learn English. Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about the, your sort of generation of Chinese tech founders and maybe the difference in mindset or outlook from folks a little older than you, and how it ends up impacting the way you run your business, the way you think about growth, the way you think about interacting with the rest of the world? This
is a very good question, but my opinion is probably a little bit different. So I always believe age is definitely not the only attribute or dimension to like try to like categorize certain like type of founders or probably not a very good attribute either. Because I think like there's, if you look at the tech founders, like Robin Li and Alibaba type, they're probably like around 40 and 50s, right? They are much younger tech founders in China, were like in 25 something. I think in the end of the day, it really depends on, it's not your physical age, right? It really depends on how old are you like inside. For example, I always give an example, like the person who created AKB48 in Japan, with a lot of teenager fans.
Super old dude,
Yeah,
right?
that's a very super old dude. So that's actually that's my point. It's like it's not really the physical age like separates what kind of product they do or what kind of strategy they take. And there are people like 45 or 50 still a person who like adventure, who likes taking risks. They probably will still have a very risky strategy in terms of the business. There are people like 30, 25, but still very conservative. So their business strategy could be very conservative. So I don't think it's an age thing. So honestly, and also like if you look at the like Jack Ma probably is very different, but like Robin Li and other folks also have overseas background.
Sure.
Right. So from that perspective, I'm no different than Robin, or like we all have US educated, so it's not like I'm more international than them or vice versa, right? So I think so my point is age is not defect about for that question. So
but I guess maybe we can talk about the kind of the China in which you grew your business is a very different one. From the environment that they had to.
That's true. So that's probably the general like a lot of stuff like going on in China right now. I think because of China, after the 40 years of urban reform, the domestic market is getting more and more competitive. There's a lot of things going on. And also with the Belt and Road initiatives, stuff like that, I think there's a trend all in the country that people would love to look outside China for opportunities or want to expand their business outside China as well. And also a lot of infrastructure probably is there, like the payment and stuff like that. And like more and more Chinese people going abroad. So all this, I think, sort of contribute to a lot of internationalization and globalization strategy or things we've been seeing for the past 2-3 years or 4-5 years. I think it definitely helped. Like for example, the Chinese people going abroad definitely helps the expansion of Alipay and WeChat Pay.
Sure.
So.
You want to talk a little bit about how the talent pool has changed over time?
There are definitely more and more engineers, especially because of the so many IPOs from the Chinese internet companies. The engineers getting paid better and better. So there are more and more students in the computer science major, and there are more and more engineers out of the college. That's definitely one thing. And also, there are comparatively there are more returnees from overseas as well, especially with China more and more opportunities. It's just more talents.
Sure.
Of course, the cost of labor also goes up a lot as well. So.
Yeah. A last one about 996 culture. I'm curious if you maybe could talk about why you think it's a thing to begin with, maybe how it's changing over time, and how you think about it with regards to your own company.
So first of all, our company is not really 996. So the 996 is definitely a very popular term in China. But I think it's like software engineers talk about it. But as I said, privately, or I would say public as well, there are actually a lot of professions in China or even across the world have worse working hours as well. So I think you have to look at these issues separately. One thing that do we have to have 996 in a lot of the companies? Maybe not. Maybe really depends on the business. And the second, 996 itself probably is not as evil or is not as bad as a lot of people think, because it's just a lot of software or internet companies or people in internet companies sort of have voice, or they like to speak out on the internet. But I think there are a lot of other professions we need to pay attention to. Like, it really depends on the angle of the topic, right? Maybe some more people want to talk about this angle is like, like all the companies, all the organizations, and kind of like squeeze people's value out of it. Then if we talk about that angle, then I'm sure, like I said, we should pay more attention to other professions as well, right? Maybe they have the voice as well. A lot of the professions like doctors or teachers, they probably have even worse hours than 9 to 6, right? But are we paying attention to? Like, it really depends, right?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Coming back to the causes, you said earlier that initially when you were starting your company, there weren't a ton of competitors. So it wasn't necessarily like, you're one of 1,000 bike sharing companies. And if you don't have better numbers than your 5 other competitors that are pitching the same VC, you're going to die. So, there are certainly aspects to the Chinese technology ecosystem that drives this really aggressive competition, perhaps even more so than in the West. Anything else you want to say, Ben?
Yeah, again, thank you for having me, Jordan. And thanks, everyone, for listening.
China Econ Talk is edited by Jason McRonald and Kaiser Guo and is a proud member of the Sinica Network from SUP China. For other great shows on China, check out the Caixin Sinica Business Brief, the Pan Daily Tech Buzz China, the New Voices podcast, and of course, the Sinica Podcast, now in its 9th year. Until next week.
Look at me， 从上到下，就哪怕小的细节也要美到爆炸。带上勾拳，节奏踩在脚下，嫉妒的也只能在网上叫骂。新一代女王出现，快点都给我让开！我从来不带眼看他们设下的障碍，一换来换去怎么办？一选择头疼，这里好星星，在踩新油门，女王的心意，耀眼的星星，时尚的记忆，搭配什么看我的心情，你可以亲吻我。